All right, today, looking at kind of the other half of the basics of Freud, um, the idea of the defense mechanism, and something that I probably should have mentioned last time, but it slipped my mind, was this. Pretty much with Freud, 99.9% of it, of everything that Freud is talking about, that happens to people, individuals, all that good stuff, the person is not even the person is not aware of it. All of these things are happening deep inside, outside of the conscious realm, and especially the id, because the id is totally submerged within the consciousness, and because the id is totally submerged, it takes a lot to try to get it to pull it out, and that's really what the idea of psychotherapy is all about. Um, and and that's kind of the cornerstone of Freud's ideas with psychoanalysis. So when a situation happens, for example, like what this happens all the time, you have your id versus your superego. Ignore the typo. It's supposed to be id, versus the superego versus the ego. So this is just kind of a recap of yesterday. The ego's job, two things. One, meet the needs of the id. Second, don't offend the superego. So, like if you saw yesterday in the clip with Crunk in The Emperor's New Groove, he had the shoulder devil wanting one thing, his shoulder angel wanted something else. His shoulder devil personifying the idea of the id, his shoulder angel personifying the idea of the superego. And what he has to do is he has to try to navigate both sides. And that's what and again, this is a very Freudian idea that shows up in a lot of cartoons. And and this is the struggle that everybody is having. And remember too, your id is going to go in one direction, your superego is going to go into another direction. And what the ego has to do in that sense is try to grab both of them and try to get them directed in the same direction. So your ego is tired a lot. Um, because, and this is a bit of an aside, um, one thing that Freud talked about is your shoulder devil, your id, is actually your more or less your psychic battery. I know it sounds crazy, but pretty much all of your psychic energy, all the energy that you um, it's kind of the best way to describe it. It's pretty much like your thoughts, your consciousness has to be fueled with some kind of power. Well, all that power comes from the id. So, and then your superego kind of siphons off some of that power, and your ego siphons a lot of that power off. So, this is one of the reasons why when you have like those desires, and this is actually a defense mechanism, when you have those desires, you can actually take certain desires that are not necessarily good and direct them into something that is maybe a bit more better, or at the very least not as offensive as the idea that you had before. Again, that's kind of what today is. It's crazy. So, this is so again, kind of in that vein. Eventually, what is going to happen, and you probably experienced this at least sometime today. Eventually, your id or your superego is not going to be happy. Now, within psychoanalysis, this is the starting point for psychological disorders because and there's actually a school of thought in this, and if we were going to get this far, we would kind of start here. But within psychoanalysis, there is this thought, and some other psychologists have picked up on this, that the beginning point of psychological disorders is right here. And it's this. Your id or your superego are not going to be happy. So, for example, think about this for a second. Let's say I was to say AP test is tomorrow. This AP test is going to determine your life. You pass the AP test, you're good. You fail the AP test, you have to retake this year. Now imagine that is real. Now, if that was real, you would begin to feel some kind of anxiety. Anxiety is normal. Anxiety is a result of either the id or the superego not being satisfied, and within the realm of, again, psychoanalysis, and a lot of psychologists believe this, barring like a truly something chemically wrong, like something physiologically wrong with your brain or your body, but something psychologically wrong, this is actually the starting point for psychological disorders. So this is what happens. Id or superego, not happy. Your ego will feel anxiety over this. We don't like anxiety. Anxiety tells us something is wrong. So what can happen, and what does happen often, more often than we realize, is the ego will employ a defense mechanism to alleviate the anxiety, to make the anxiety go away. Like, for example, you guys have known, like, take for example, maybe you've been here, maybe you haven't, a bad report card from your teachers, or a bad progress report, or you find out you bombed a test, and you don't necessarily want your parents to know about it. You feel that anxiety. And then from that anxiety, in order to make that sense of feeling of dread go away, is you will start to do stuff to make that anxiety go away. And that's really kind of the idea, because our ego employs a defense mechanism to alleviate the anxiety, because honestly, it's an easier way than just facing the music head on, or so we think. This is actually something that's just kind of hardwired into us as people, because as people, we are wired to try to take the easy way out. Psychologically, physiologically, everything. This is one of the reasons why, people that try to do exercise to work out, you have to vary up the exercises, because if you do the same exercise all the time, your body is going to find ways to cheat. Same thing with our psychology. When you fail, you get that bad grade, you don't necessarily want to tell your parents. So you try to cheat your way around the situation by employing some kind of defense mechanism. And this is the first and usually the most common way. We rationalize, we explain away the cause of the anxiety. We make excuses. Kind of like my little example up here. I failed because my teacher hates me. I have heard that. I have failed because I couldn't study. I failed because I work. I failed because yada, yada, yada. I didn't do my project because I was doing this other class. I'm sorry, officer, I did not notice I was speeding in a, I didn't see the sign when you pulled me over for speeding. I thought I was still in a 70 mile per hour zone, not a 35 mile per hour zone. So this is kind of where we try to, talk our way out of it. It's not my fault because XYZ. There you go. The second kind that comes up is repression. And these are where we unconsciously, or sometimes consciously, keep disturbing thoughts away from becoming conscious. So, kind of the idea is this. We just we deny, we forget. Like the little example up here. Um, suppression means you're consciously suppressing your anger. People that, sometimes they get yelled at, but they smile about it. Here's the question, why? Why do they smile? Are they smiling to repress a sense of anger? Or are they, why? Are they smiling to suppress a sense of inferiority? What are they trying to do? So again, repression is you unconsciously keep those disturbing thoughts away. Now, what happens with repression is those thoughts are still there. They're just not within your conscious. These thoughts get repressed into your unconscious. And what can happen is little things can bubble up here and there about, something that's a situation that maybe reminds them of something. Like, for example, I had a student a couple years ago. He graduated a couple years ago, and he was in an he was having an issue with his girlfriend, and ultimately the reason why I was having an issue with his girlfriend was because she was talking to her ex-boyfriend about just some classwork. It really wasn't that big a deal. It wasn't like one of those bitter breakup things. They were just like, it doesn't work for us. They shake hands, they leave friends. And her new boyfriend was having some issues that they were talking to each other. Her old girlfriend was talking to old boyfriend, and he was having an issue from it because of whatever. And he was kind of telling me about it, and I asked him, was like, well, why do you feel that way? Just ask just a bunch of why questions, and eventually what happened was he was kind of repressing feelings of inadequacy, feelings of, oh, I'm a dumbass, I'm an idiot, I'm this, I'm that. And so he did not necessarily consciously understand those thoughts, but those thoughts were still there. And they were bubbling up here and there, and he was getting upset about something that really wasn't even that big of a deal, honestly. Denial, this is my favorite. One of my favorites. Refusing to accept the reality of something that causes anxiety. This is really just straight up denial. A lot of people, like alcoholics specifically, the stereotype. I don't got a problem. I can drive. That's denial. Even then, people who deny over all sources of issue. I'm not failing my classes. I'm good. All your grades are a 30. And they'll do things, and people will do things to kind of keep a false reality to a certain extent. In essence, denial is lying to yourself. I don't have a problem about something. So, like for example, well, you guys know that during the year I'd print off grades, and I put them up on my wall or on my cabinet doors. And it's funny because the people who always say the loudest people who say they're passing the class, but in reality they know they're not passing the class, they never do two things. One, they never ask me what they need to do to fix it. Second, they never look at that paper. They never go and look and see their grades. So what they do is they deny the reality. Oh, I'm failing psychology, government, economics, sociology, world history, world geography. I've taught them all, and I've done that for years. But they will never go look. And they'll say to themselves, oh, I'm going to pass, I'm going to pass, I'm going to pass, but you're at a 20. But they deny that kind of reality, that reality is real. Projection, this is when someone attributes their thoughts and feelings to someone else. So, for example, usually you see this in politics. Like, you see a lot of projection. A lot of people, they'll call a politician racist, sexist, evil, whatever. And usually it's because they're trying to actually cover up their own thoughts and feelings. So the idea, again, kind of like the stereotypical boyfriend girlfriend situation. Boyfriend's messing around with a girl on the side, so he yells at his girlfriend that she's messing with it around with someone on the side. So again, what they're doing is they're taking feelings that they have and putting it on somebody else. I'm not doing this, you're doing this. I'm not, whatever. It's not my fault, it's your fault. You're doing it. I'm not doing it, you're doing it. That kind of thing. One like the little example that I have here. Person doesn't have the little me, I don't want to admit I am bitter. So they project that feeling onto their therapist and they just say, my therapist is bitter. And really the idea is they don't want to, someone doesn't want to pretty much deal with the issues themselves, so they just claim somebody else has it. I don't have the problem, you have the problem. Reaction formation, this one is probably a bit more constructive than a lot of the others. And unless, Hey Arnold's a kind of an example of it, but it's not, kind of the not good side of it. But pretty much the idea is this. Reaction formation is when you replace the unacceptable feelings or urges with the opposite. So somebody may, like for example, if you've ever seen Hey Arnold, you have Helga the girl, Arnold the guy. Helga is secretly in love with Arnold, but she's afraid of the vulnerability that those feelings, if she were to properly express those feelings, ultimately she's afraid of the vulnerability that may come from it, because that's putting yourself out there. So she spends the entire series, calling him football head and threatening to beat him up and doing all sorts of things. And that's reaction formation. Another thing that can work in the opposite direction is, somebody may have, they just, what am I trying to say? Oh yeah, someone may just have a sense of, you know, they may feel bad about something. So what they will do is they'll try to replace those feelings with something a bit more positive. But really the idea is this. Here's the crux. You have feelings about something. Those feelings are unacceptable. So you replace those feelings with the opposite. Because the logic goes, if, for Helga's case, if liking Arnold is going to cause me the anxiety, being mean to him will take it away. Regression, this is going back to an earlier stage of less mature, an earlier and less mature pattern of behavior. So when you see a grown man throwing a fit because he didn't get his way, people who stress eat, and this kind of goes back to Freud's psychosexual stages, because remember the first stage was the oral stage, where as a small baby you got comfort from eating, in the ingestion of food. That made you feel good. You ate. That was comforting. That meant you were safe. That meant all that stuff. So when stress happens, test coming up, coronavirus outbreak, whatever, people stress eat. Some people, when they, somebody that maybe was not able to move past the anal stage, people that, when they don't get their way, like a 30-year-old guy throwing a fit because they're mad at something. Like, for example, I remember one time I was walking down the hallway at a school, not Taylor, but another one. And I was walking down the hallway, and I saw a dad chewing out his daughter, like screaming at her. Hardcore screaming her out. Cussing, yelling, doing the whole 30 yards. And, the counselor was there, some of the other teachers were there. I didn't know the kid, so I just stayed around, just in case things got crazy. And I had to clothesline someone. But really, here's the question. Why was the dad screaming at his daughter? Well, Okay. Well, what was going on was daughter was skipping classes, not doing her work, yada, yada, yada. But why was the dad upset? Think about it. Why would the dad scream and yell at his daughter because she was doing that? So here's kind of my theory. Daughter's acting out. What does her behavior say about him? He's a bad father. So he's got the counselor, he's got teachers all, teachers in the hallway, I'm in the hallway. So now he feels a certain bit of anxiety. He has to assert his control over the situation. So what's the best, so in a stage 2, you throw a fit. You throw a fit because now, for that moment, nobody's really going to do anything while you're screaming and you're yelling. One teacher was pregnant. She was backing away. Smart of her, but she was starting to back away a little bit. Because, she's got to worry about her baby. And, everybody was like, okay, back away, give him his space. Because that was his way of getting control of the situation. And that's the thing with the anal stage. As a person, you want to be in control. And you can go down the list from there. But again, regression. You fall back to an earlier, less mature pattern of behavior, mainly because you're in a situation and you don't know what to do. Like psychologically speaking, you don't know what to do in that situation. So you go back to a behavior that you think will kind of work. And again, unconsciously. Displacement, this is where pretty much you express yourself. You can't express yourself at the source of your emotions and urge, so you take it out on somebody else. So the classic is this. Guy is at work. Boss screams at guy. Guy cannot scream back at boss because boss will fire him. So he holds it, he bottles it up, goes home, sees little Timmy make a small little mistake. Guy screams at kid. Pretty much you take all the anxiety, all the feelings, all the emotions that you would feel that you wish you could direct towards one thing, but you can't do it for some reason. Your boss, teacher, whoever. So you hold on to it, and then you find another outlet for it. That's the idea of displacement. And so, right here are some of the levels of it. So pretty much, kind of the idea is this, and some of the other defense mechanisms that other psychoanalysts have added, but pretty much they go from level 1 to level 4. Level 1 are kind of the pathological defenses, where it's a denial, projection, but to the point where you're just nuts. And then level 2, the immature, where you have you project it, passive aggression. People sometimes act out. Sometimes people escape to a fantasy world, or even create a fantasy world. And then level 3, neurotic defenses, intellectualization, reaction formations, and then all the way up to level 4, when people say, they laugh about problems, they use jokes. That's kind of where you have the humor, the sublimation, which is kind of a version of reaction formation. But pretty much sublimation is this. You take somebody that wants to kill people and cut them up. They intellectually understand that that is not a good thing. So they take those desires of wanting to see what people look like on the inside and become the world's best heart surgeon. Maybe the world's best detective. And if you've ever seen Sherlock, if you haven't watched Sherlock yet, watch this. But But one of the kind of ideas of Sherlock is this: Sherlock Holmes would be a really good criminal. And one of the things that, kind of keep him from going over the edge is socially, he understands being a criminal is a bad thing. So I'm going to take my desires to do crime and instead focus all of that skills and talent on catching criminals instead. So, or it can even be something like maybe you have a sense of inferiority about something. I am not good at this. I am not good at that. So maybe you're terrible at math. I am terrible at math. Okay. They take that feeling and they study math. And they end up becoming great at math because they put forth the effort. That's sublimation. And so this right here is everybody's heard the Let It Go song. Let it go, let it go. That song. Pretty much, I put the link on the Schoology page as well, but pretty much, Let It Go is actually a very sad song. Or, as I call it, Why Elsa is a Psychological Hot Mess. Because the whole song is defense mechanism after defense mechanism after defense mechanism after defense mechanism. And it'll actually point it out, like where these defense mechanisms show up. And the whole idea, and it's actually kind of one of the biggest ironies, it is supposed to be the big YOLO song of the movie. And in reality, it is a horrible cry for help. And if you've ever seen the first movie, pretty much the gist of the movie is this. Elsa gets the powers. She sings the whole Let It Go song, which is her engaging defense mechanisms. But because she's engaging these defense mechanisms, what does she do? She isolates herself in a castle and in turn ends up hurting everybody else around her until eventually she's able to come to terms with ultimately the source of her anxiety, which is her powers. And so yeah, just watch it and think about it a little bit. And if you've seen the movie Frozen, actually kind of think about the movie a little bit because a lot of it is steeped in psychology, a lot of Freudian psychology. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this. And I will see you next time. Peace out.